In almost every musical ever written, there's a place, it's usually about the third song of the evening. Sometimes it's the second, sometimes it's the fourth, but it's quite early. And the leading lady usually sits down on something and sings about what she wants in life. And the audience falls in love with her and then roots for her to get it for the rest of the night.
Disney music is one of the most important things to exist in their medium of their own films. It is what binds and connects everyone to the feeling such films create regarding their own work. And this is seen by how many times we constantly sing their songs day in and day out, depending on how it makes us feel. Something we have to thank for the Renaissance era reviving in terms of Disney storytelling that wasn't really an active part of their films beforehand until they decided their entire story should include a variety of them to relate to the character or characters at hand. Something we all saw introduced within The Little Mermaid, the film that marked the start of the Disney Renaissance because of such elements that returned to the charming musical fairy tales of Walt Disney's own day. All of course thanks to the efforts of lyricist Howard Ashman and composer Alan Menken attached to the project creating these songs for the film, where only one of them would be the driving force of the entire overall film, one for the main character and the story itself within the title of The Little Mermaid that is now known as Part of Your World, Disney's best song ever created. Because when you look back on something like this, and every other subsequent Disney film that followed, even before, this really jump-started the quintessential sound we associate these stories with, in terms of both having the simple I Want song that was important to develop the motivations of the main protagonist in Ariel, that inspired the men and women who followed soon after. Now this isn't to say I think it is the greatest Disney song, which of course would still be When You Wish Upon a Star, or the fact that it is my most favorite because that is still held towards another song being Great Big Beautiful Tomorrow from the Carousel of Progress, but how I think this is the most important one in terms of an individual's desire, more in terms of how a movie is supposed to feel with you and what we want moving forward in the purpose within the world. Which is now kind of funny to think about that in terms of Disney songs, the best of them actually include world in the title, thinking in terms of A Whole New World, which is also one of the best too, but rather decided that this one still holds up more due to the importance for the passionate elements that went into making it. Like when we talk about how Disney movies or other musicals in general are musical theater, this one actually does stand out being the pinnacle of such because of the fact of what was involved. Because if you remember the production of the movie, then you truly realize how close this song was from being cut due to Katzenberg thinking it wouldn't test well with kid audiences, where the directors, Ashman, and the animators really fought for it to be kept in, as it was very important to tell in Ariel's journey. That it was more than just a song for the sake of it, and of course, a part of the character itself. Where of course, in speaking about that, we kind of again have to include the 2023 version of the film with Halle to represent a side that misunderstands why it's so great to begin with, the importance of a good song. I mean, it is good for its own rendition and represents the grand legacy that the song holds, where many people online have created so many covers over the years celebrated by millions of people around the world that we love so dearly, commenting how great it is, but just how it doesn't seem to grasp why this was the best of the best in the first place. It's a song that's more than just a song, if that makes sense to you, in a way that's more of a passionate desire for something that is so desperately out of reach for our main character, despite the fact that Ariel is the daughter of the King of the Seas itself, a vast open ocean with creatures who live and sing in harmony, free from the chains of that humans put on ourselves if we understand the negative aspects of our own society. And it's how she doesn't actually care about such a world could be bad, including things within her grotto filled with a collection of items that may seem trivial to us, but everything to her. It was just something needed that Disney storytelling really didn't have from before. Well, they kinda did, but not to the extent you see now when you look at this film, as they weren't very explicit or as important as this one. They do have small good moments that are recognized to date as the greatest of such, but overall within the design of the feelings at the time, they weren't quite as deliberate when Howard actually wanted to make a song that serves as the heroine's inner diary of thoughts in that moment, a moment that Musker and Clements actually wanted her to sing in the grotto. And that's where the I Want songs were introduced formally to Disney at that point in time, and how his involvement actually taught them to tell a story with song, and how it can play a vital part of the movie's process without feeling like it could just be a song in the normal sense, just like future adaptations would do. Where, as he says, this remains to be the central issue that is to be discussed in the entire plot that is revolving around the choice of her own desire, wanting to become human and then becoming human herself towards the end of the film, where without such a song, your story would not make any sense at all, and would not give you any meaning to connect to such a plight. It's all about telling the story itself along with the singing, making it feel like it matters to your heart, where it will justify its own existence, and why animation is more important to express this, as it allows the feelings of how it is to be portrayed made to accurately be displayed, easier to accept compared to simple live action, more about expressing the desire of what it means to be human, and more in this case of a non-human character. Where this song simply begins by Ariel just talking, questioning if her father's right. I mean, actually not in the film version and more in the soundtrack itself when you actually listen to that, where it just wants you to understand her feelings to begin with, tossing with the idea that she loves to explore, where then of course both official versions begin with her not understanding of how such a world that makes such wonderful things could be so bad. Because as we go into the first verse, she goes through her collection asking Flounder if it is neat, or more so in this case the audience, as we enter the perspective of other creatures like Sebastian, shocked at the fact that Ariel does have all these artifacts in her grotto that is from the human world, things that would shock him because of the fact that Triton does not trust humans.
Wouldn't you think I'm the girl who has everything?
And this has double meaning to it, where she does say that she's the girl who has everything. She's been around the shipwrecks and everywhere in between collecting all of these items, but also the fact that she is the daughter of Triton, meaning that you have access to the kingdom and the respect of her fellow merfolk or other sea creatures, everything you want or desire in your life that is complete. Something that really sets up what you know beforehand and right now at this very moment of the film.
Looking around here you think, sure, she's got everything.
And this is the first part where you notice how the song is sung. Described as whispered intense singing compared to belting, as Howard Moore explained, as we will talk about a bit later with Jodie in the booth. This is something that's done because it allows her to easily switch to simply talking the lyrics from singing in some points when she says stuff like sure, she's got everything, to really convey some sort of emotion that the character has in this point of the film, what she wants. And they say this is also done to be similar to normal speech as well, where it raises and lowers into both talking and singing, but never really fully delves into each one, which makes total sense in terms of what she wants, that this is her song and she wants to express herself in the best way that she can, and the way that you can fully understand her. Of course, all done for the fact that you can accept her for singing in the scene, rather than, just because, like that magical moments that you usually associate that doesn't make sense at all. One where the animation itself also needs to be praised within the work of Glenn Keane and the other animators involved in this sequence alone before the 3D techniques were introduced in animation, really rotating around Ariel to show us her collection of a trove of treasures untold, all simply hand-drawn in this moment to really show us that her desires are as real as anyone else's, where you really stop to think about that she's not a drawing in this scene, but a real living creature who wants to be just like us, where that passion really does exist, and should be commemorated because of the fact it was one of the hardest in the entire film. This is where you can see her excitement about these things, expressing in the next few lines speaking in terms of thingamabobs and what's its galore.
You want thingamabobs? I got 20.
A credit due to the actual directors of the film suggesting to change some lyrics. Most of them didn't work since Ashman was already dedicated to how it really sound, where they did actually revise that some of their suggestions were indeed idiotic, but how this was originally done to describe the actual elements that she collected like fine china, which did not make sense since her character rarely interacted with the human world, whereas lines like this made more sense to her learning from a dumb seagull and the fact that she was a curious little mermaid. It really adds a lot of curiosity to her that's easy to digest for kids or adults to understand, as we would notice foreign objects for the first time. But the biggest part of this scene is the end, where she somberly expresses who cares, no big deal, before transitioning back to saying wanting more, really playing into the intimate feel that it wants to be conveyed.
But who cares? No big deal. I want more.
This allows us to enter the pre-chorus of describing what she wants, where she says, I wanna be where the people are.
I wanna be where the people are. I wanna see 'em dancing.
And then questions Flounder about several words that pertain to human actions.
Walking around on those, what do you call them? Oh, feet.
This gives her a lot of character by the song alone, discovering her inquisitive nature, really wanting to understand what we do as humans. We walk, we dance, we sing, all that jazz. Again, like I said earlier, it constantly shifts throughout the speaking and singing tone without feeling abrupt in its own nature that is performed in a simple manner, all done to convey the emotion that she's yearning for to discover herself, the purpose of what an I Want song truly should be. And it's just very beautiful, to be honest, in the way it's all played out. And all again thanks to the efforts of Howard Ashman with his own direction with Jodie, featured in these clips from the behind the scenes portion that showcases us the importance of what he was really aiming for, thinking in terms of using less voice and more intensity, where the emotion must be placed first and foremost compared to, say, belting like the other versions do, as we will have to get to.
That's good. Keep it, I'm gonna try one more, even more, using more of the tomboyish. Everything resonates. So it's like a big isn't needed. Okay. It's like every little breath you take is enormous. Everything everything registers. It's like it's about all that emotion and then not letting it off. Not letting it off, but having it here. When's it my turn? Wouldn't I love that stuff? Really, it's.
Am I still a little too loud?
You're great.
Oh, better that time.
You're great,
better.
but you are.
Okay.
It gets a little bright in here. That what would I give if I could live out of these waters? The intensity is better than what would I give is better than noise. Yeah, but they're not doing it from them. It's inner intensity.
So even more, not as singy, basically.
Use less voice and more intensity. Okay. Just get in on yourself.
As you can see, he's directing Jodie in a way that gets her into the character itself. The ones where you do have to appreciate the work that voice actors do and put as much as regular actors in terms of the quality of giving the character life and matching the design of who they were meant to be, especially with how they dim the lights in the studio to match the underwater feeling, knowing again that the scene itself in the final cut feels dimly lit except for that light that shines at the top near the surface where she wants to be, that she longs for as she goes up. Where, as she goes up, more singing is involved in the scene.
Up where they walk, up where they run, up where they stay all day in the sun.
And then talking as she goes down in frustration to how people on the surface don't reprimand their daughters.
Betcha on land, they understand, bet they don't reprimand their daughters.
They contrast itself to how the singing is more of the I want feeling and how the talking is more of the resignation of I can't feeling. Where after she says this line, the song gets more intense in her own feelings, elongating words like ready to stand and then ready to know what the people know, wanting to ask them their questions and get some answers. Where it takes those questions she did in the last verse within the softer speaking tone and decides to build them out, just like the word burn.
What's a fire and why does it? What's the word? Burn.
This works well because it really dives into her wanting to take the plunge, or in this case rise towards the surface since they are under the sea already. It's a moment that calls for it because she is ready at this point, waiting for her turn, wanting it to come at this very moment.
When's it my turn? When I love to explore that shore up above.
All before pulling herself back into her own reality.
Out of the sea.
Because once she says the second to last line in the chorus, it switches back into a more softer, whispery quality, more desperate hearing this sigh right here. And then continuing on when she finishes it.
Wish I could be.
And this is truly the best part of the entire song, concluding with a desperate plea to be part of that world that she would never probably get the chance to experience it at all in her life. The resignation that she probably will stay down here. It communicates true feelings, especially that of sadness from the joy she tried to convey earlier, ending in a way similar to how it began under the sea with that tune in the background.
Wish I could be part of that world.
Where now you kind of see and understand more about her than you ever did from before, if such a song wasn't even included at all, like listening to the crap advice of Katzenberg. Where every breath took into the song itself truly is an integral part of the experience of Part of Your World in that understanding of Ariel as a character. Where you also realize that the song itself titled Part of Your World, she never actually says that until the reprise, wanting to be part of that world until she finds Eric as the one human being she made a connection with specifically. It's about the feeling of wanting to be part of that world before the your gets into the actual motivations of what she specifically wants. Where when she does save a human, again, she now wants to fully explore more of that to be a part of that, where the short reprise also extends this on the part still communicating that same emotion in a more desperate tone where she doesn't know how she's going to do it, but she's so determined to be part of your world no matter what. And I also forgot to include the part foreshadowing in the song itself that Howard actually explained when she says, "What would I give if I could live out of these waters?"
What would I pay to spend a day warm on the sand?
A very excellent line in the case that shows her determination to find out what it takes to do so, a point of actually making a deal with the devil in terms of Ursula. And when you think of all of that, it's a song that can have many interpretations for that same desire, emphasizing the freedom to explore what a character feels like with those true emotions. That those emotions make sense because it hones down on a specific idea and the sacrifices that a character is willing to take, which is something sadly lost within the modern productions for other recent movies like Wish, doing an I Want song also that has no real desire to explore what the character really wants in their heart, becoming more vague than what it should be. Songs like this Wish, in terms of the modern day Disney, represents something that doesn't understand the same heart or value we saw with what went into Part of Your World, where both the story and the song only make sense if the theme is there throughout, which Part of Your World is the theme of the entire film when you hear it in several big moments and included within the end of such a film. You have to have a song carry its way throughout to get yourself to that place to believe that the story is a real event that is happening, transforming us from the moment that we begin. And it's why we also have to dive into the remake a bit, misunderstanding this point, where no matter how good you can sing a song, it just becomes generic and boring like some of us would have thought these Disney songs were growing up before reaching the point of understanding what the songs truly mean. Because again, Halle is a good singer, giving a great performance of the song as most of us would think and why she was ultimately chosen to begin with as Ariel, but she never delivers it with the same weight that we just discussed throughout, with that direction that was intended from before. Because if you think about it and how the song was originally performed, it was performed in this very way because that's what the original songwriter intended from its very beginning. Howard did not make a song just to be belted out like that or stretched into a typical pop fashion that we associate these days, and made a song that was more natural to the feel of what someone wanted inside, a purpose to an actual story in the sense, that it felt human despite coming from someone who truly isn't, but actually yearns to be one. The only reason people like this one is because she is good at singing it, and the fact that it is attached to the original, that people expect something like that to already be there because they already know that's the heart of what made it special in the first place. Where it's all done nowadays so that you can perform it at places like Disneyland with ease, because you know that's what the performance gives off, just meant to be promoted off your basic memories and nothing more, like a stage performance of any song you could just jive with. And it's something I've already talked about before in my overall hour-long review of the remake itself, side by side, but also still very, very important to understand today, as it will generally become forgotten as time rolls on. The same mistakes of other films like Aladdin with a whole new world that doesn't show any visual or lyrical connection that makes two parts whole. Because when you actually think about it, we always remember the animated films. We hold these dear because they elicit a feeling that's very special to our heart. These other films don't, because it's a poor imitation of such works and will always be remembered as such. It never carries its own weight as a good story and just becomes a simple product that they put on for sale because they cannot make an actual live action movie on its own and with an original story. And like I've said before, I'm not very smart in music, but I can hear and feel the difference between two versions, what it makes me feel and what it pertains to a story. Where it says Jodie vocals only span through C4 through C5, while Halle is doing a C sharp to D5, raising the vocals much more higher from its previous limits that allowed for that seamless transition from speaking to singing, where this one just doesn't work. It feels awkward and annoying at times if you put the original into context, trying to raise it higher to another octave in order to sell you on the fact that she's a good singer. Now she does still speak in the song because that is the way it was intended to be delivered, asking such questions about what do you call this and that, but it still feels more rough and hard, wanting to hit those higher notes still to put more emphasis on her. It's not making you believe in her as a character, but more of the idea, which is still not the intended effect that the original had in making the animation and the song feel as real as possible. Remember what Howard said earlier about intensity? Well, this one really doesn't focus on that intensity and rather more on her voice, really pushing her out there like that's the main part of why this is all here to begin with. Where instead of what he said earlier saying that intensity is better than noise, Apparently in this version, noise is better than intensity because of the fact that it's about the song itself. So why should you actually put some genuine heart into something that's clearly profiting off an idea that already worked with the blueprints already placed in it? It doesn't make sense to do so because it's already there, and it's all for money. Sure, a remake wants and needs to be unique as its own film as a way to sell it as a realistic version, but they always make it feel as unrealistic as possible to how proper feelings are derived from it. Because that noise is also derived from the fact that the entire sequence is dedicated to focus solely on her, rather than the elements around her. Thinking again of how the original song does this rotation, adding in Flounder and Sebastian as active participants that represent the audience being part of her world in this very scene, making it seem more like a typical music video or stage performance of Halle Bailey. I mean, this is obviously due to the fact of Disney's weird necessity of CGI realistic animals being super ugly and not being able to work as they once did, but those small elements still contribute to the passionate feeling that is trying to be conveyed in that very scene. Every single piece, from the animation, the music, and the sound itself, are the reason why it is so great to begin with. But again, you have several moments that are choked out of its attention. First, when she rises to the surface like the original, more focused on her speaking wandering free.
Wandering free, wish I could be. Wandering free, wish I could be.
As you notice in this scene, it feels more abrupt because the direction called for her to speak the lyrics similar to the original without feeling natural. Remembering, it stayed within the same range vocally in Jodie's version as to why it flowed naturally within her desire here. It's about a feeling being communicated that seems and feels real. This is where I also have to mention that Howard and Alan chose several different segments from Benson's recording session that are not perfectly sung that were included in the final version, like those spoken words. This was done because the songwriters wanted her performance to sound as real as possible, and you can't do that with normal singing. It just doesn't make sense, and it feels more towards the stereotypical image of what Disney musicals bring. And that real attitude is why this one is not very great sounding at all, where it comes off very harsh and abrupt when she wants to convey that emotion because the purpose is to sing for the sake of singing and putting the camera way too closer on her face than needed to be. Yes, again, the song is about her, but it's also about the overall feeling that you go within her inner thoughts and you see the stuff happening around her. And now you're just elongating moments that don't need to be emphasized at all, suffering from the problem of over-singing, as they call that to describe the stuff like what Jodie did that wasn't hitting the right tone for Howard in those cuts. This is also seen, especially towards the end, as I mentioned, from the original song being the best part, that is now the worst part of the song because she's raising the pitch constantly to reach out instead of the consistent tone that the original stated in the word above. And then of course, stating wish I could be.
Wish I could be. Wish I could be.
Now, this is horrible because, again, looking at the original, she goes back to the whispering tone while floating back down from this small opening that really conveys how she's locked under, never being able to go up compared to how it reveals that she was already down there with the shadow just on the rock because the film really wants to focus on her and solely on her tremendous singing, even though that's not the point and more unrealistic than the unrealistic animation. These things truly miss the entire meaning of the song to begin with because it's about the desperate feeling of the character, the information that a story carries that makes it more special, described as the bigger than yourself moment, which is what these films truly are, enjoyed by so many no matter who you are, and of course still continued in the reprise itself, representing her determination, where the original attitude still matched Howard's original purpose that would be a resigned defeat, where she wouldn't be able to actually join that word as that emotion is conveyed in every whisper that she does, compared to the remake that wants to save the best for last in that scene, being a little hollow throughout until the very end when she says part of your world, as some sort of triumphant moment without understanding the little emotion in her voice that made her character special towards that idea. It's all about attitude, and this one does not have any attitude, matching a wooden tone that shouldn't exist. Like you can hear it again in both where one understands what it takes and the other one just does it like a typical pop cover on the radio if that mattered at all, which in fact was the actual intention if we think about the recent Disney songs, is that they just want to play the music just because it's popular, that everyone can celebrate it just because, without any single meaning that it carries more than it should. Where the thing that truly matters is how you really feel about something, which songs like Part of Your World encapsulates brilliantly, how it is more about the inner passion of our heart to desire something more in our dreams and the hopes out of loneliness or anything that is to be wanted. It's a song that gives the movie its purpose for its entire existence and meaning, in a world that doesn't understand you quite yet before telling us why within your own mind. Something that goes beyond just the song itself in its own essence to what should be taught, where it instead becomes an entire emotion that resonates beyond who simply just hear it. A nature that expresses what art can bring to the elements that don't really exist at all in life, turning fiction into fact and drawings into a reality, ranging from happy to sad, connecting to something that we wish did to become a part of our own world. Every detail of it fully relates to the meaning that animated movies can bring, and especially ones done by Disney that showed it was just much more than a company and a studio of artists, and why I love it dearly to this day. Where I really think Walt would have loved to see such a thing come to life if he lived to that moment, as said by Roy, who really wanted to bring and feel passion in each element of a story, where it has lasted over 3 generations at this point, with thousands more to come in the endless circle of life. A truly timeless classic that I hope continues on for the future, for the beauty that such music can bring to anyone else to feel what they want and journey into an unknown to be part of that world. I'm all done now. Goodbye.